Reeve, principal of Vanderveer Elementary School.
And I'm Dr. Tian, superintendent of schools.
We are so excited to welcome everyone to our Vanderveer Evening Learning Academy.
You are all in for weeks and weeks of enjoyment. Our academy will run on Tuesdays and Thursdays, starting on Tuesday, February 23rd, and will end on May 6th. Kindergarten to first grade lessons will start at 5 o'clock p.m. Second and third grade lessons will begin at 5:30 p.m. And our fourth and fifth grade lessons will launch at 6 o'clock p.m. every Tuesday and Thursday evening.
Don't worry if you miss a lesson. There is a VELA, spelled VELA 2021 link on the Vanderveer website, which will bring you to an archive of every video, which will be available to enjoy over and over again. The library will keep growing each week as new videos are added. You will be learning alongside your very own Vanderveer teachers.
Also, we have teachers and administrators from across the district that will be bringing you fun learning experiences.
You will become scientists, engineers, mathematicians, writers, world explorers, and learn to communicate in different languages as you explore concepts in math, reading, writing, science, social studies, world language, and so many more.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and we encourage you to visit often and view other lessons in our learning library as we add to the videos each week. Enjoy.
Vanderveer students, hello! My name is Mrs. Parcells, and I sunk to the bottom of the ocean. Do you know what it means to sink or to float? We're going to find out in today's lesson called What Floats Your Boat? Let me swim up to the surface of the water, and then we'll get started. Whew! What a great journey I had underwater. I saw so many fish, sharks, coral reefs, and even some sunken treasure. But have you ever wondered what makes things sink or float? That is the important question that we're going to be answering in today's lesson. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to make some predictions about real objects from my real classroom about if we think they will sink or float. Then we'll test them out and see if our predictions were right. After that, we'll watch a video about why things sink and float. Then we'll read a book, make some paper boats, and test out our paper boats. So let's have some fun with science. Ready? Let's go. Let's learn about sinking and floating. I have a collection of objects that I'm going to show you. Some of them are going to sink and some of them are going to float. Your job at home is to make predictions. You're going to shout out your predictions when I hold up an object. If you think it will float, you're going to shout float. And if you think it will sink, you're going to shout sink. And then we'll test out our predictions and mark the data on our chart. So let's get started. We're going to test 6 different objects and see if they sink or float. Let's go. All right, here's my bucket of water. The first object I'm going to test is a crayon. Do you think it will sink or float? Okay, let's test out your predictions and see what happens. Ready? I'm going to drop the crayon in the water. Can you see it? It went all the way down to the bottom. So did the crayon sink or float? That's right, the crayon sinks. It doesn't float. Was your prediction correct? Okay, let's see what's next. What's next on the chart? You got it, a pencil. Wow, let's see. A pencil looks like a crayon. It's cylindrical in shape and it writes. So they're similar, but they're made out of different materials and the pencil is longer. I wonder if we'll have the same results with the pencil as we had with the crayon. Let's find out. Oh wait, first make your prediction. Do you think the pencil will float or sink? Okay, let's see if you're right. 1, 2, 3, drop. How interesting. Can you see that at home? Well, check it out. Our pencil is floating around on the top of the water. It did not sink. It did not go down to the bottom. Okay. How interesting. I wonder why that happened. Okay, what about our next item? What's next on the list? You got it, a penny. Now, a penny is very different than a pencil and a crayon, right? What do you think will happen? Do you think the penny will sink or float? Okay, let's find out. Ready, set, drop. Can you see what happened to the penny? Yes, it's all the way down at the bottom of the water. It sunk. So I'm going to mark sink for our penny. What should we do next? That's right, the popsicle stick is next on our chart. What do you notice about the popsicle stick? Does it look like any of the other objects we've tested so far? Oh, I heard someone say that the popsicle stick is flat. Have we tested anything else that was made out of wood? Like the popsicle stick? You're right. The pencil was made out of wood. And looking back at my chart, I remember that the pencil floated. I wonder if the popsicle stick will float too, since they're both made out of wood. Let's make our predictions. Do you think the popsicle stick will sink or float? All right, let's see what happens. 1, 2, 3, drop. Look at that. It's floating on top of the water with the pencil. So far, 2 objects sunk and 2 objects are floating. I wonder what is similar about the objects that are floating and what is similar about the objects that are sinking. Okay, the next one we're going to test is the toy car. Vroom, 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 vroom. What do you think the toy car will do? Let's think about the toy car. What is it made out of? What shape is it? How heavy is it? Okay, have you made your predictions? Okay, let's see what the toy car does. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, drop. Wow, the toy car is down at the bottom, driving around with the penny and the crayon. Okay, so our toy car sinks. All right, we have one more. We have a cotton ball. Cotton ball is very light and it's made out of fluffy cotton. What do you think the cotton ball will do? Make a prediction. Okay, here we go. 3, 2, 1, drop. Oh, it's floating. But wait a minute. What's happening? At first, the cotton ball was floating. but then it started to sink. I wonder why that happened. Let's think about it. So, what changed for the cotton ball between when it was floating and then it started to sink? What changed? Yes, the cotton ball was dry when we put it in the water, and then it absorbed the water. In fact, watch this. It absorbed the water so much that if I squeeze it, all the water can come right out. It absorbed the water like a sponge did. So when the cotton ball was dry and it didn't have any water, it was floating. And then it absorbed the water and it sunk to the bottom. Let's learn more about why objects float and sink with this Brain Pop video.
Ships ahoy, matey! Oh no, our ship was supposed to float, not sink. I'm not really sure. What sinks and what floats? When something floats, it stays up by itself. The bottle, seagull, and seaweed all float on top of the water. When something sinks, it falls to the bottom. Look, the bubbles of air float, but the treasure chest, gold, and jewelry all sink. They can't stay up on their own. All that stuff seems pretty heavy. Maybe heavy things sink and lighter things float. You're right, Moby. The ship is really big and heavy, and it still floats. So, what makes things float? Looking at all this water sure is making me thirsty. Thanks. How about some ice? The ice cubes are floating. And look, the liquid started here, but then rose to here after you added the ice. The ice cubes make the water go up. Let's try something else. The coin sank, and it made the water go up a little. I bet an object can sink if it weighs more than the water it pushes away. And an object can float if it weighs less than the water it pushes away. Right, Moby. Our ship floats because it weighs less than the water it pushes away. But weight and size aren't the only things that decide if something floats. How does shape help things float? Let's make some boats that can float this time. Good idea, Moby. We can use clay. Mine floats, but yours sinks. My canoe is hollow. The air inside helps it float. Your boat is a solid block. Nice boat, Moby. What are you making now, Moby? The Titanic? I hope there aren't any icebergs in that water.
So, what did you learn about sinking and floating? Great. We learned that objects sink when objects are more dense or heavier than the water that the object is pushing away, and that the objects float when they're less dense or lighter than the water that they're pushing away. We also learned that objects don't only sink or float based on weight. Shape also plays a role in whether or not this happens. So, what we're going to do now is we're going to make our own boats, just like Moby did in the video. I made a boat out of newspaper. Now, based on what we learned in the Brain Pop video, do you think my boat will sink or float? Awesome prediction. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to read a book called Curious George Rides a Bike. Then I'm going to show you how to make your very own newspaper boat. So let's read, and then we'll talk more about the boat. Curious George Rides a Bike by H.A. Rey. This is George. He lived with his friend, the man with the yellow hat. He was a good little monkey and always very curious. This morning, George was curious the moment he woke up because he knew it was a special day. At breakfast, George's friend said, "Today, we are going to celebrate because just 3 years ago, this day, I brought you home with me from the jungle. So tonight, I'll take you to the animal show. But first, I have a surprise for you." What do you think the man with the yellow hat has for George? Can you make a prediction? Okay, let's see. He took George out to the yard where a big box was standing. George was very curious. He's wondering what could be in such a big box. Out of the box came a bicycle. George was delighted. That's what he had always wanted. He knew how to ride a bicycle, but he had never had one of his own. "I must go now," said the man, "but I'll be back in time for the show. Be careful with your new bike, and keep close to the house while I am gone." George could ride very well. He could even do all sorts of tricks. Monkeys are good at that. For instance, he could ride this way with both hands off the handlebar, and he could ride this way like a cowboy on a wild bronco. And he could also ride backwards. But after a while, George got tired of doing tricks and went out into the street. The newsboy was just passing by with his bag full of papers. "It's a fine bike you have there," he said to George. "How would you like to help me deliver the papers?" Look, they have something in common. What do they have in common? That's right, they're both riding bicycles. Okay, let's see what happens next. He handed George the bag and told him to do one side of the street first, and then turn back and do the other side. George was very proud as he rode off with his bag. There he goes, delivering the newspapers. He started to deliver the papers on one side of the street as he had been told. When he came to the last house, he saw a little river in the distance. George was curious. He wanted to know what the river was like. So instead of turning back to deliver the rest of the papers, he just went on. There was a lot to see at the river. A man was fishing from the bridge. A duck family was paddling downstream, and 2 boys were playing with their boats. George would have liked to stop and look at the boats, but he was afraid the boys might find out that he had not delivered the papers. So he rode on. While riding along, George kept thinking of boats all the time. It would be such fun to have a boat, but how could he get one? He thought, and then he had an idea. Do you see the thought bubble above his head? You can see what he is wondering about. What is he wondering about? Yes, he's wondering about how he can use a boat in the river. Does he have a boat with him? No, he only has a bike and some newspapers. What can he do? Wow, awesome predictions. Let's keep reading and find out. He got off the bicycle, took a newspaper out of the bag, and began to fold it. First, he folded down the corners like this. Then he folded both edges up, brought the ends together, and flattened it sideways. Then he turned one corner up, then the other one. Again, brought the ends together and flattened it sideways. Then gently he pulled the ends open, and there was his boat. Now the moment had come to launch the boat. Would it float? It did. So George decided to make some more boats. Finally, he had used up all the papers and made so many boats that he could not count them. A whole fleet. Watching his fleet sailing down the river, George felt like an admiral. But watching his fleet, he forgot to watch where he was going. All right, we're going to stop our book here because the rest of the story goes on about how George and the man with the yellow hat goes to the animal show. And I wanted to stop at this picture of all of the boats, the fleet of boats that George made. What did he make the boats with? That's right. He made them with newspaper. And we learned a little bit about sinking and floating earlier in our lesson today. So would you like to try to make a boat with newspaper and see if it sinks or floats? Me too. Awesome. Let's get started. I'm going to show you how to make a boat with newspaper, just like Curious George did. So get your newspaper out and let's begin. Okay, students, do you have your newspaper? Great. You also might want to have an adult nearby in case you need help with some of the folding. But I'm going to help you as best I can. So grab your newspaper and make sure that it's 1 2-page spread, just like this. Fold it closed so that it's in half. Then you're going to fold the newspaper like this. One of the most important parts of folding is that you make sure your edges line up perfectly or as close to perfectly as you can, and then press along the creases with your fingers to make sure that the folds are nice and tight. Good. So now your newspaper should look like this. The first thing we're going to do is take this top right corner. Can everybody point to the top right corner? You got it. You're going to take this top right corner and you're going to pull it right down like this. So it comes to a point at the top. Now let's point to the top left corner. Where's the top left corner? Good. Grab that and pull that down as well. Wow, we made a new shape with our newspaper. What shape did we make? Yes, the top of our newspaper looks like a triangle. That's right. Great. Now, I'm going to take the top part of the bottom. See, there's still some here. I'm going to take the top part of the bottom and fold it up a little bit to about halfway. And then make my crease and turn it over and do the same thing on the other side. Good. Now I'm going to turn it over again. I'm going to take the top half of the bottom one more time and fold it up over my triangle. If at any time you need me to slow down, just pause the video and rewind to the parts that you need help with. And then I'm going to fold this up again on the other side. Now I have what looks like a hat. So just to recap, don't do this, I'm just showing you what to do. We folded our top 2 Then we folded up on the front, turned it over, up on the back, turned it over, up one more time, turned it over, then up one more time. Now we have what looks like a hat. Take your hat and go like this. You should be able to open it like this so it almost looks like you're making a bowl or a cup. Keep pulling gently, but while you're pulling, start to press down so that these two corners meet, this corner and this corner. We're going to make them meet and give each other a high five. So I'm going to pull on the edge, and there they are. My two corners are meeting. Okay. When I do that, I end up with this flap that won't lay flat and this flap that won't lay flat. So I'm going to just kind of tuck one under the other. And then on this side, tuck one under another. Great. Now what shape do I have? Yes, a square or a diamond. That's right. Great. Okay, this side that has these on the bottom, we're going to now fold that up to the top. Okay, so we're taking this bottom point to the bottom, and we're going to fold it up to the top point to the top. Okay, so bottom is going up to the top, and then we're going to crease, and then we're going to turn it over and do the same thing on the other side. Bottom is going up to the top and crease, just like that. Okay, we're almost there. So now we have a triangle again. The next step is we're going to turn our triangle over one more time and start to pull it open again. And while we pull, we're going to pinch so that our corners meet one more time. I'm going to do that again. Ready? I'm going to pull, and while I do that, I'm going to pinch so that my corners meet at the top. And look, it's almost like we're making a pattern of what shapes we have. Now I'm back to having a square. Okay, last part. Now what you're going to do is you're going to open these top corners very gently. Open them out. Okay, so you're taking your square, okay, and you're going to open like this and pull your corners out. You might have to tuck a couple things in and gently pull, but then you have a boat, just like Curious George made in the book. Okay, so what do you think? Should we test out our boats and see if they float? Of course we should. Let's go. Okay, students, here we are back at our container of water. Now at home, ask a parent what kind of container of water you can fill if you wanted to test your boat. You could use a bathtub or a sink or a mop bucket, or if you wanted to go out as a family, you could even visit one of the streams in Somerville to test out your boat. So once you have your boat, you can just place it in the water. Do you think my boat will float like Curious George's boats did? Let's see. It does. So what this tells me is that my newspaper boat is less dense than the water it's pushing away, and that's why it is floating. Now, I wonder if I added some items to my boat, some passengers, would it still float or would it begin to sink? So at home, what you can do is you can test this theory out as well. Once you make your boat, you can add things like buttons or pennies to your boat or bottle caps. I see something is happening to my boat, and I don't want to spoil the surprise for you, but something is happening to my boat. Something is changing. I wonder if you can figure out what is changing. I'm not going to tell you. You have to test it out yourself. But I'm starting to get a little bit worried that my boat isn't going to be floating for much longer. Okay, so you can test this out at home as well. I'm going to keep putting some more passengers into my boat here. Uh-oh. Do you see what's happening? Yeah. Things are changing here. So when you make your boat and test it out, add things to your boat as well. You might even want to count the number of pennies or objects that you place in your boat until something happens. And look it, I noticed something. My bottle cap is floating too. So we found another object that floats. Thank you for joining me tonight. I hope that you had fun with what floats your boat. Let me know what you were able to add to your newspaper boat and if it sinks or floats. Bye, Vanderveer. See you next time.